Hello, and welcome to the Wild Hearts Business for Good podcast. Our guest today is Laura Faulkner, Director of Shared Services at Nationwide, the world's largest building society. Laura leads a team of over 700 people across a number of disciplines, including procurement, banking and savings operations, property services, third-party risk, and communications delivery. Laura's career has spanned over 20 years, working across multiple industries in firms such as GSK, EY, and RBS, where, prior to joining Nationwide in 2016, she headed up RBS's procurement function globally. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. To help us get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What path did you take to get where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely, of course, and thank you very much for having me. Laura Faulkner. I'm the Director of Shared Services at Nationwide Building Society. I guess one of the main things in my life is I'm married to Ian, who's a fine artist, and I've got two fabulous, I have to say that, children, Ben and Anna. I went to university in Glasgow and then moved to live and work in London for a number of years before actually returning back to my hometown where I still live. And I guess straight from uni, I took a role with Polaroid, and you might remember that firm. Unfortunately, no longer with us, but I joined their procurement team, and I've really stuck with that. I've built my career forward in this profession since that day. I joined Nationwide in 2016, and over the years since there, I've been really fortunate and I've been broadening my areas of accountability. Currently, as I said, I'm Director of Shared Services, so I'm responsible for procurement, property, and operations here.
But you didn't just jump from Polaroid straight to Nationwide. What was your journey like in between?
Yeah, so I, as I say, was very fortunate and was with Polaroid for a few years. And then, as I say, moved down to London. I joined SmithKline Beecham, as it was then, and while I was there, it became GlaxoSmithKline in procurement, responsible for property procurement there and the building of their new headquarter building in London, GSK House, which is a fabulous project to cut your teeth on. I then moved to Ernst & Young, and I was involved in, you'll see a thread here, I was involved in the building of their headquarters in London, More London Bridge, down by the Mayor's office. And while I was there, I was headhunted by RBS, who again were just about to build their new headquarter building in Edinburgh. Which is now Gogarburn, and I started there and joined there in 2002, and over the forthcoming, what was that, 14 years or so, with a small break in between, really took my career through from procurement in the property and the professional services area straight through to being the Chief Procurement Officer globally when I left in 2016.
And that was when we first met. I remember our first conversation. It was actually over dinner after a Wild Hearts Gel Summit. We were talking about our upbringings and just how similar they'd been. We touched on this previously. In what way has your upbringing and your family background and your personal values influenced your career and how you approach your role?
Yeah, and it was a really interesting day, that Gel Summit. But then the dinner, unfortunately, sitting next to yourself, Mick, and getting to know you, and I think it was very clear from the get go that we had very similar upbringings as well. Same as you, I was brought up in a very close family. Mum, dad, older sister and brother, and I was very much the baby of the family, and my brother and sister were a great support to me. I will say that in case they listen back. I loved school, and I guess from an early age it was always talked about that I would go to uni. Now, I would have been, and I was, the first in my family to go to uni, and not that my siblings couldn't have, but it just wasn't, I don't think it was as easy a route for them a decade before me. But for myself, being brought up in the 70s and 80s in one of Scotland's new towns, there were lots of opportunities. And we talked about that evening, Mick, and these opportunities were aimed at really encouraging social mobility, funding, career guidance to ensure that university was in the grasp of all kids that should be there. And I guess I was brought up to really believe that I could do anything I chose to, that there were no barriers. And I do worry that I think we are one of the last generations to have been supported in this way. and not that everything was perfect then, but I do wonder whether we can get back some elements of that in our society just now. Personally, my parents didn't pressure me into anything. I sometimes wish they had, but they were always just expecting me to try to be my best, and it worked for me. And I do think that really did set me up in how I've lived my life. I do think everybody should be given a fair chance. I do think personally, if you do try and you do your best, that is generally good enough, and really just taking that balance of of really being driven by your values as well. And I'm very fortunate just now. I think I've now landed in an organisation that really is quite strongly aligned with my value set.
Social mobility is something I share your passion for, and it's one of the key reasons that we actually created the Wild Heart School programme. Staying with your experiences, have you ever had an experience in your career that at the time felt like a failure or a serious setback, and yet it went on to create success for you in the future?
Well, gosh, absolutely. And to be very honest, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're talking about 5 years. Um, and it's easy when you ask, Laura, what was your path? When you do it in sequential order, it sounds very simple. But to be very honest, when I was at RBS, I wasn't the immediate choice to become the new chief procurement officer when the vacancy arose. I I I, I had to do some real soul searching then to decide whether did I want to stay in an organisation that at that point in time didn't see me where I thought I could be. And I did. I started thinking around leaving RBS then. And I guess the rejection, I can't word it in any other way, crystallised in my mind that this was the job I wanted. But actually, funnily enough, it crystallised as well that I really did want to stay at RBS, but I had to make some difficult choices. But in I don't necessarily mean in all good stories, but thankfully, actually, the decision was reversed. And before I did really start putting into action me leaving the organisation, the decision was taken to, I'll be blunt, I think they were quite clear, take a chance on the internal candidate, and they promoted me into the role. And as I said, I hopefully was seen as doing that well. I stayed for a number of years after that as the global chief procurement officer for RBS, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it felt like unfinished business for me. It was one of those things. Not getting the role felt like, oh, what a shame. I really felt as though I could have done it. But at the same time, organisations have their decisions as to why you're maybe not exactly the right person at that point in time. But as I say, thankfully they came round, and I really enjoyed my time in that role at the end.
And on that theme, what decision or action are you most proud of?
Oh, that's easy. Apps. Yeah. Oh, really? It is. It is easy. And it's funny, you make decisions, and I said earlier on, I would say this has been one of the most enjoyable periods of my career. Has been working for Nationwide.
Mm,
It's a very individual kind of
mhm.
organisation. It's a mutual, so it doesn't have shareholders, and it's owned by its members, those that have a savings, a mortgage, or a current account with us. So you really are driven around just doing everything you possibly can for our members. That's the purpose. Um, but what I've said as well is it's a small organisation. It's a lot smaller than any of the other organisations really that I've ever worked for, but it's still big enough to matter, and it's still big enough to be interesting, and it's easy enough to get things done in most circumstances. And no more was the case when in 2018 in January, Carillion, who were, as most of you will know globally, is um, they went into administration. And Carillion were one of our biggest suppliers. We had outsourced all of our property operations, etc., to them over the previous years. Um, and it was an amazing thing that we had done some business continuity planning, seeing that this was a possibility that this could have happened from probably the summer before. But lo and behold, not like most other organisations did, which was just to find a duplicate supplier to take over if anything were gone wrong. We had worked through and then invoked insourcing for all of the hundreds of Carillion staff members who were working on our account. And we also then made the decision to directly contract as well with the around about 150, 170 Carillion subcontractors as well. Now that secured the hundreds of jobs of the people who had worked on the Nationwide account, who did feel like they worked for Nationwide. We secured all their roles, bringing them into the organisation. And then it also, for the wider, economy, secured the contracts and the livelihood and quite a big part of those contractors as well, ensuring they were paid and ensuring certainty of work going forward as well. And that was not something that I just walked up and said, this is what we should do. Let's go. I had to go to our board risk committees. I had to ensure that we'd done all the due diligence and the thought around it. I also had to commit that I would bring it in by the end of that year in the same financial status, cost to Nationwide as it had been. And thankfully, through blood, sweat and tears of the teams here at Nationwide, we did do that. And as I say, the pride in being able to really do something like that, which was the right thing to do for Nationwide. It was spending our members' money wisely, but it also had a really broader societal impact as well. And as I always see, in anything that you can do like that, will others learn from it as well? Because it just shows there's another path and another way you can actually do things. So a very easy one for me, Mick, to talk about.
No, absolutely. But what was it about Nationwide's culture that made you feel you had permission to do that? I mean, do you feel that you could have delivered a result like that in another organisation?
It's, as I say, when you are built around a core purpose, and your core purpose is, and this is quite simple, building society nationwide. That is our purpose. It's nothing else other than that. So that means supporting people save for a home, and it's have a home for their savings. It's as simple as that as well. When you're talking about an organisation that is quite simple, but is built on a social core purpose, it's very easy to put your ideas forward. But we're not a charity, and we've always been very, very clear that, in our view, profit without purpose doesn't work. But also the reverse goes, purpose without profit is not sustainable either, especially not for our members. So we do need to make sure, I was quite clear to make that point, that I had to commit to bringing it in financially on a level playing field, but at the same time, I don't know many other organisations that I would even have got over the first hurdle of saying, this is a great idea and this is what we should do. And it was the fact that I had full support from our chairman, our CEO, and the board, that means things like this actually, it aligns with the core purpose. But as I say, I was kept an eye on and kept track of the financial outcome for it as well, because we did have to make this work.
That's a really interesting point about Nationwide's founding purpose. Nationwide was founded with purpose at its core. How do you see that evolving in the future? How do you keep that mission and purpose contemporary and relevant in a competitive world?
Well, I guess our mutual difference is what defines us, and the values of how we do business. We're here to support our members, and I've said it already, but this is our people that have their mortgages, their savings, or their current accounts with us. And that's through owning a home, saving for the future, helping them with their day-to-day finances, or helping them live in a better environment as well. And it's that last piece that's quite key for us to, at this point in time. Things change over the years, and obviously just now we are living in very, very interesting times, whether it be through, exactly as we sit here, and through the COVID-19 pandemic, or whether it be through the climate crisis. At Nationwide, we are working through all of these challenges we're seeing in the macro environment, and particularly with regards to climate. We've made £1 billion worth of loan funding available to accelerate the pace of change needed to make housing market greener. And we're also calling on government and house builders and other lenders as well to create meaningful incentives for greener homes. Now that means us putting our name out there, us lobbying for change. So it's not just about doing the right thing in smaller ways, which always do matter, but it's making sure that, especially in the home agenda and housing agenda, we are really seen as making changes there as well.
Mm-hmm. Is that one of the reasons you became signatories to the United Nations Global Compact?
It was, and that's had a really good, I'd say, focusing impact for Nationwide as well. Around about that time, just before that, we had set up the Responsible Business Committee at Nationwide, which then was chaired by the Deputy CEO, and really to raise the focus of environmental, economic and societal impacts, and the role that Nationwide has on society. And I've said it before, our purpose is building society nationwide. So how does all of that with the UN Global Compact align with that? So as I say, we set up the Responsible Business Committee, we signed up to the UN Global Compact, and then really started focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, I guess, close to my heart, it was looking at the 3 pillars that we wanted to focus in through the supply chain, in particular, through environmental, economic and societal. And it was really taking all those actions that we're already doing and had a small foothold, but giving them the focus, giving them the structure, so that we could really devise a strategy to take us forward for the next 3, 5, 10 years, and really start to think about having some quite ambitious goals in there as well.
And when you set up your procurement for mutual good strategy, even though championing social procurement was aligned to the company's values and your commitment to the global goals, it wasn't all plain sailing. What advice would you give to your procurement peers who are looking to procure more sustainably in their own organisations? I mean, what can they learn from your experience?
We definitely, I've always talked about this, but the ability to have a seat at the table is almost the first step. So very fortunately, I sit on the Responsible Business Committee for Nationwide. And it means that in my roles, I've talked about shared services, I can talk about procurement activities, the supply chain. I can also talk about the property and the operations impacts as well. And being there for Nationwide, I was able to talk about a lot of the work that we'd undertaken over the previous, say, 5 years, quietly in the background, as Nationwide always does, very, very humble about a lot of the activities it undertakes. For example, at a certain point, only a couple of years ago, having negotiated the UK's largest solar farm contract, and then as of this year, we've quite quietly gone around, but it's making sure that all of our energy, electricity, are from green sources, and the very small amount that is not the gas and diesel, we are offsetting through very ethical means. But it's making sure that the story internally is told so that you can garner the support. We've got 18,000 colleagues at Nationwide, so how do you garner and really get all of your colleagues involved in all of this as well? So it's about sharing your story and learning from what you've done in the past, and recognising there's always more to do. So far we've, even with regards to my area, we've kept the story alive within Nationwide, and we're getting more voice, I think is the phrase here, around this topic. But then externally as well, it's looking at how can we help other organisations, or how can we learn from other organisations. So far we've shared our learnings, at events hosted by yourselves at Wild Hearts, and by the Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, and with business in the community as well. And we've also used our annual partner supplier events, conferences, to encourage our suppliers to look at different ways of operating. That success, that financial success, environmental, economic, societal success can be driven by doing things in the right way as well. And we asked last year. We looked at our supply base and our top 50 suppliers we invite to our annual conference, and the purpose that day was around talking about Social Enterprise UK's Bi-Social Corporate Challenge and asking them would they be willing to sign up as well. Because our view is if you can be evangelical about the topic, it is incumbent upon you to do this, and if you can, and really share the success you've had and the benefits you've had in operating a different way. And for us, you can imagine our suppliers are global players out there who hadn't heard about the challenge. And you assume everybody does. So it was trying to get more people engaged in it and giving Social Enterprise UK more leads into where they could go as well. So we're looking at sharing the story, bringing more people on the journey with us. And then recently with Business in the Community, co-hosted with Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, our event looking at procurement for mutual good as well, and how we could all share. So we had around about 60 delegates come from organisations across the UK just to talk for a day around environmental, social impacts of modern slavery, talk about social enterprise as well, and how we can grow small businesses and diversity in our supply chain as well. So it really is about talking, sharing, and learning. I think that's one of the key things as well. We don't have all the answers, absolutely not. So you've got to be willing to learn and change and pivot your strategy when there needs to be as well.
Mm-hmm. But it takes confidence to do that, though, doesn't it? I mean, not all organisations are willing to admit they've made mistakes. Social Enterprise UK's by corporate social challenge is remarkable, and it's so inspiring how many leaders like you have held events to promote the programme to their suppliers. Thinking of suppliers, you've said before that you can't do it alone, that if you want to achieve procurement for mutual good, you need to bring your suppliers on the journey with you. With that in mind, what do you look for in a supplier? How do they qualify to be part of your sustainable social procurement strategy?
At this point in time, and this is where I think with most of my peers, we are still working through. There's governance aspects. So obviously we have got our policies with regards to procurement and how we wish to act, how to behave within our own organisation, and the impact that therefore then has in society outside. And I guess when you look at the firms that we choose to do business with, we are gauging that they do meet our governance standards. So there's almost a precursor to even doing business with Nationwide. And I'll be honest, this is with most organisations now. I think the understanding of the impact of, for example, modern slavery in your supply chain is so critical that we all need to work together to abolish this. And we work with an organisation, charity organisation called Unseen, who are working with us to help educate our organisation and help us ensure that our supply chain, we do not have modern slavery within our supply chain. We are a regulated organisation as well, and both the FCA and the PRA have quite strict regulations and understandings of what is expected of us as a financial institution working in the UK. So some of these things are already ground in governance, but Mick, I think it's also how do you want to work with organisations that align with your purpose as well. And we're very fortunate in our supply chain that we can talk, we can learn from the organisations, while it be such as Wild Hearts, while it be some of our property firms such as Waits, for example, who really do share our values, and it's how you can spread that further, broader across the supply chain as well. So as I say, it's governance, but it's also ensuring there's some of those less tangible factors as well around what that firm does, how they work with their staff, how they treat their organisation, And one of the benefits that we've seen of doing business as we do, a lot of the partners that we work with are quite happy to say as well that their colleagues, their staff, are delighted to work on a nationwide account because they get treated in a more partnering way as well. So it really does have benefits all round to ensure that you get great service from your partners, but also the colleagues within those organisations can see the value in how you operate, how you treat people, how you treat either your members or your colleagues, and what goes around comes around, Nick.
It's interesting, actually. What struck me when you were saying that about sharing values, it's almost a redefinition of the value chain,
Yeah.
moving from a financial value chain to more a partnership between organizations that share each other's purpose and values. That can only lead to a more enriching and sustainable business relationship. Um, on that theme, then, in your opinion, Laura, what are the biggest opportunities and threats in the future that procurement leaders need to be aware of now?
I've mentioned two already. So we are sitting at this point in time in the middle of a global health pandemic. We are sitting at this point in time in the middle of a climate crisis. And then I would suggest as well, over the last month or so, as we sit here in June 2020, we're sitting in a societal crisis where the Black Lives Matter movement and the search for social justice across all peoples has been brought to the fore. So how can organisations face into these political, social, environmental factors? How can they face in, not turn their backs, but actually lean in and do their part? And I think just now, with regards to, I guess in my world, in the procurement and the supply chain, we are a reflection of society. So the procurement teams are the best link that an organisation has to the outside world. They can bring in other partners, other suppliers in, and the learnings in from other organisations into your own company. So it's how do you seek out solutions to some of these? And the pace of change, just now we've seen it already, the pace of change has never been it's never been as such. So how do we adapt? How do we work faster? How do we keep within regulations and the governance of our organisations, but actually adapt and be able to provide, I guess, more agile solutions? And you talked about it already, but value is derived in many, many ways. It can be cost, it can be service, it can be, I'll see values with a capital V as well, around your purpose as an organisation. At Nationwide, it's very easy. We've not had to make something up or hire in a marketing PR agency to tell us what our purpose and our values should be. We're very, very clear for the 130 odd years that we've been in business. It has been around building society and the purpose that working together as a mutual, you can deliver more than if you were on your own. And from my point, procurement is the same. By working together with your own organisation, by being the eyes and ears for the outside world, you can bring in new insights, new innovations from outside, and really help your own organisation drive forward its strategy. And as I say, whether that be economic, environmental, or societal, but help bring that forward and take those learnings back. But then I think it's incumbent on us as procurement professionals to also share that with your peers outside as well. And that's where hopefully podcasts such as this can help share that you're not on your own. There are other people facing into the same challenges. Nationwide does not by any means have all the answers, but I think it's being open to the fact that we're willing to learn, but we're willing to definitely be out there talking to other organisations as well, sharing the pain, sharing the joy, and hopefully we'll move forward in a more positive way.
One of my inspirations for this podcast series was the realization that because of Wild Hearts, I have the privilege of having the most inspiring conversations with leaders all around the world who share Wild Hearts values. And I wanted to make that knowledge as widely available as possible to help as many people as possible. In that spirit, Laura, what advice would you give someone listening today who has ambitions to become a procurement leader and make a positive social impact in their career?
I would say, please, I don't mean to be glib here, but it is stay curious. The minute you stop questioning either what your own organisation are doing or being interested in the strategy of your organisation, the minute, especially as a procurement person, you stop being interested in what's happening then outside of your own organisation. What are your competitors doing? What are other organisations in completely different sectors doing? As soon as you stop being interested, curious about all of that, I think that's when things go stale, if I'm being very honest. And I think to stay interested, in particularly in the why your organisation is building its strategy the way it is, and then being able to think about the partners and the supply chain that can be built to support that, how that can be done. That's it for me. It's staying curious, staying interested, taking opportunities up, and trying to say yes as much as you possibly can.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that there are immense demands on you, especially during times like these. I'm deeply grateful to you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again soon in the future.
Thanks very much, mate. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.